So thank you everyone for coming along this evening. My name's Cameron Brown. I'm the Venues and Companies Manager for Brighton Fringe, and you've joined us for another one of our Fringe Academy workshops. These run year round, and you can see more info about Fringe Academy on the Brighton Fringe website. There are a series of free workshops that we put on to try and tackle some topics that events would need to know to taking part in the festival and just generally putting on events as a whole. And this is a popular one, and one that is a great addition to the program. We've got Anna Jefferson and Claire Soper here from Arts Council England. They'll be running us through the ins and outs of doing a project grant. They've got a short presentation, and then we'll take a tiny break and then move on to a Q&A with Claire and Anna, so they can get through any questions that you've got about running submitting a project grant. Lovely. If I pass over to Anna and Claire now, if you've got any questions for me, you can reach us at takepart@brightonfringe.org, or our telephone numbers on our website as well, but I'll pass over to Anna and Claire now. Wait, before I do so, there was one more thing. Just some housekeeping for questions. If anyone's got any questions along the way, do pop them in the Zoom chat. If they're relevant to what we're talking about at the moment, I'll try and pull them up, but if not, we'll be sure to go through all of them at the Q&A section at the end. So do pop any thoughts and feelings in the chat. We will get to them. But over to Anna and Claire. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Cameron. Just to apologise first as well, because I'm on two screens, so if I keep looking this way, it's just because I've got my notes here. Welcome to the session. This is for people who are interested in applying for Arts Council National Lottery project grants. I'm Anna Jefferson. I'm one of the theatre relationship managers in the South East. I have brown hair, I'm wearing a grey pullover and red lipstick. Joining me today as well is Claire Soper, who I job share with, who is also theatre relationship manager in the South East. This session is going to be 90 minutes, and it's going to be a presentation followed by questions and answers. And our plan is to run the presentation, and then, as Cameron says, we'll have a 5-minute break before we get to the Q&As. So I'm just going to pass on now to my colleague, Claire.
Thanks, Anna, and thanks, Cameron. So hello, as Anna says, I job share and I'm a relationship manager for theatre in the South East. I'm a white middle-aged woman with grey hair, black glasses. We've got someone else's audience. Sorry, Chris, can you turn off your...
Yeah. Sorry, I got him. There we are. Sorry about that.
No worries. So, as we've mentioned, this session is for people who have not applied or have very little previous knowledge of our National Lottery project grants. And as a shorthand going forward, we'll refer to these as project grants. The project grants have been refreshed, and there is a new application form. So some of you who may have applied before may well be interested in how things have changed. And today we suggest some ways of how to make a strong application and talk through with you how you might think about your project in terms of Arts Council's new strategy. So before we crack on, I believe Cameron can do a snazzy poll to find out who.
Let's have a look. Should people have a little poll pop up coming up at the moment? But if so, there are a couple of questions if you're able to answer those. Most important is about the ACE project grant, but interested to know if you're planning to take part next year. Would be handy. They do pop those in. A lot. I've got 4 responses. A lot of no's. 100% no so far for ACE project grants. One person was successful so far. Yes. And can anyone see these, or shall I share these? I don't know if there's an option to share. I might do that after the fact. But we've had 10. I assume the other. If Anna and Claire and myself haven't answered them, I think that's everyone. But no, 90% no, have not applied, and 10% one person, yes, and I was successful in my application before. So there we are. And again, the majority have not taken part in the Fringe either. So that's interesting to know. There we are. Lovely.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that. That's really helpful. And congratulations to the person who was successful. Hopefully we'll be able to help you to be successful again. So with project grants, we want them to be accessible to everyone. If we can have the slides up, please, Cameron, we'll perhaps do the presentation. For everybody to see, and don't worry, I'll be sending this on to Cameron after the session, so you will get this, so you don't need to write anything down. It will all be sent through to you along with links as well for key information, and hopefully that will be enable you to be able to put in questions as you wish, and for us to have a chat after this presentation. So the next slide, please, is about our access and it being accessible to everyone, so that if you have a barrier, which means you find it difficult to apply, you can get advice at these places here. And there are also accessible formats such as BSL, Braille, audio, easy read, or large print, or we can pay for a support worker to help you to apply. And if you've got a query about access, then you can have a live chat with a member of our customer services team by clicking on the icon on any of our web pages. And you can also contact them at the number on the screen here. And you can also read our dedicated support information sheets on the website, and I'll include the link for those later. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Cameron. So today we're going to go through these elements on the screen. It will give you some background about Arts Council and project grants, and we'll also talk about its close relationship to our strategy, Let's Create. We'll signpost you to information about Grantium, the sort of things you can apply for, and we'll take a look at the application form sections. We'll then finish with information about how we make decisions and how you can contact this. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Claire. Okay, so this section is around who are the Arts Council. So who are we and what do we fund? So we're a national development agency for creativity and culture, and we distribute public money from the government and funds from the National Lottery, providing funds for individuals, arts organisations, libraries and museums. And you might have heard of our national portfolio organisations or engaged with one of them. We've just gone through our round of funding very recently. We provide funding for over 800 arts organisations, from large organisations such as the Royal Opera House and the National Theatre, to independent publishers and dance companies and carnivals and organisations like that. We provide some other development funds, and this one, project grants, is our most popular funding stream for individuals and smaller organisations, and that's what we're going to be talking you through today. Okay, so if we get the next slide, please, Cameron. So we have recently developed a refreshed version of project grants, but what is it? So anybody can apply for project grants. It's an open access funding programme for arts, museums and libraries projects, and it's made possible with funding through the National Lottery. And what do we mean by the word project? So to put it in a context, a project is something that, this might sound really obvious, but it's got to have a start and an end date and things that you want to achieve during that time. And your project will allow people to experience or take part in artistic work and cultural activity, either as part of the project or in a longer term. So it needs to have benefit to other people as well. And it will involve one or more of our supported art form disciplines. So they are, if we could go on to the next slide, please, Cameron. So we fund projects involving one or more than one of these. So these are the areas that we cover: dance, music, theatre, visual arts, literature, museums, and we can also support some work in libraries and combined arts as well. And that can mean lots of different things. It might be a combination of some of the other art forms. It can also be how we describe festivals or carnivals or other types of celebrations, or it might be projects that explore new technologies in the arts, museums and library sector. If you're not sure whether we can support your work, get in touch with one of us and we'll let you know if it's the sort of thing that we fund. Okay, over to you, Claire.
So next slide, please, Cameron. So what can you apply for? The list here, it tells you making work. So this might be writing a play or a book, choreographing a show or putting on a production. Events, that would be a play or a gig, concert or performance. Workshops, that's learning opportunities. You might run a workshop to pass on your skills in dance or writing to people who want to learn. You can also attend a workshop as part of a wider project so that you can be better at what you do. Touring work, taking a play, workshop or a gig around an area or the country, or doing research for a new project. So that could be talking to people and finding out about places, themes, or other research that will inform a piece of work you want to make in the future. In this case, we would want to see that this will reach people in the long term, and you can do this by showing us your track record or by confirmed partners who will show or publish the work. In many cases, your project may likely be a combination of all of these things. Next slide, please. On the flip side, what you can't apply for. So this is the sort of activity you can't apply for, work that won't reach people in England, either in the short or long term. So you can apply for research or to write a book, so long as you can show that people will see, hear, read, or experience it in some way in the future. Things that have already happened or that will happen before we can make a decision. And that's within 8 weeks of submitting for applications under £30,000. School or university courses, you can apply if you're a student, a researcher, a school or a university, but we can't fund anything that should be covered as part of an accredited course or curriculum. You will have to show that your project is extra or separate from your course of study. Cinema or fashion. There are other organisations to cover these kinds of things, like the British Film Institute or the Fashion Council. We can support artists that use video as a way of reaching people, but cinema as an art form is not part of our remit. Next slide, please. So here is some key information for you to look at. Your project should benefit people living in England as an audience or a participant. Generally, you can apply for projects up to £30,000 and over £30,000. However, if you're applying for the first time, we would strongly recommend an application of no more than £30,000. You can apply as an individual or an organisation in England. You don't have to be a professional artist or a well-established organisation to apply. You can apply for research and development projects where the main activity is writing, creating or collaborating to develop a piece of work for the future. And project grants are always open, so you can apply at any time. If you apply for under 30,000, you will receive an answer within 8 weeks. So is project grants for you? We think it is. We hope it is. Whatever your background, the size of your organisation, or the stage you're at in your career. If you're a creative, cultural practitioner or organisation in England, project grants is open for your application. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Claire. And Claire was saying about being able to apply at any time as well. It is literally any time. It's a roll and open access fund. So our data team had done some work on when people put their applications in, and it turned out that a large majority of artists press submit at 2 a.m. So entirely up to you when you put it in, but yes, that's so I'm going to talk to you about the application form. But before we talk about that, it's important to know about the Arts Council strategy, and that's called Let's Create. So this is our new 10-year strategy and also our delivery plan of how we're going to deliver that. So to put it into context, Let's Create is the vision for how we'd like to see arts develop in England during the next 10 years. And the delivery plan is a set of more practical steps about what we'll be doing to take support for that strategy over the next few years. So when you're applying as an artist to any funder, they'll usually want your project to help them achieve their aims. So all of our aims are contained within the Let's Create strategy, and it's built around 3 outcomes and 4 investment principles. And the outcomes are what we want our strategy to do, and the principles are what we believe in as an organisation, as a funding body. So Project Grants is closely aligned to this strategy, and we want you to tell us how your project will help us to achieve our aims and our investment principles. The actual Let's Create document is quite a lengthy document. So if you're looking at it, it's probably best to focus on the outcomes of investments. Please read it all if you fancy, but it's the outcomes and investments are the real key part of this. We've also got an easy read version, or using the Project Grants application guide where the key points are published. There's loads and loads of information on our website, so I'd strongly recommend kind of having a route around there and having a look at stuff before you start to put an application in. So the application form will ask you to write about your project, and it relates to at least one of these 3 outcomes. And these are creative people, cultural communities, and a creative and cultural country. And then there are the 4 investment principles, and these are inclusivity and relevance. And this is the only one in any application form which is compulsory. And then there's ambition and quality, dynamism, and environmental responsibility. But more on all of those in a minute. So could we go to the next slide, please, Cameron? So I'm going to talk you through the application form. And I don't know whether we say this later on, but everything, the application form and the way that we communicate and do everything is through our portal, which is called Grantium. So if you haven't put an application in before, I would suggest setting up a profile on Grantium for yourself. It normally takes several days for your account to be verified. So as Claire had said beforehand, with the length of time that it takes us to make a decision, don't sign up to Grantium at the same time you want to put your application in. Give yourself a bit of breathing room before you do that. So you set up, you sign up through our portal on Grantium, and then it's going to ask you a series of questions. And again, I would strongly recommend, while you're doing this, just another top tip, do it in Word and then kind of paste it over. Don't write directly into the application form, because it has this glitch that if you're on a page, even though you might be typing and writing the most wonderful things, if you're on it for more than 15 minutes, it assumes there's no activity and it will just log you out without saving it, which would be utterly heartbreaking. So do it in Word and then paste it over. Okay, so what you'll need to answer beforehand, there are these 4 questions to start with. So the first is essential information. So this is just basic information about you and your project. Then there's feasibility and risks. And this is where you tell us your plan for managing the project, what your budget is, and how you'll respond to any risks or challenges. We'll go through all of these in a bit more detail, but and then the outcomes. And as we said before, the project doesn't have to address all the 3 outcomes, but we do want to know how your project aligns to at least one of them, to help deliver our strategy. And then also we'll ask you about the investment principles. And in this section, you use the investment principles to build up an in-depth picture of the project you're applying for. And this gives us a stronger understanding of your intentions and plans and how the project will contribute to delivering our strategy. Okay, if we can go on to the next slide, please, Cameron. So Claire and I will go through these different stages of the application form with you. I know we said obviously ask questions at the end, but if anything as we're going through doesn't make any sense or you need a bit more clarity, please ask, because it might be easier for us to catch those queries as we go along. So we're going to go through the different sections of the application form, and then starting with the essential information sections. So this is the first thing you'll be asked. So this section includes a headline description of your whole project in 300 characters, which is approximately 50 words, and then a more detailed one in 800 characters, which is about 100 to 200 words. So it's not much. So it's almost like your elevator pitch. Think how you can surmise your entire project in 50 words and 100 to 20 words. So think carefully about these project descriptions, because yes, 800 characters, it's not a lot, but this box gives you really useful information for whoever's reading it, which may well be us, about your application, to get a quick understanding of what it is that you want and what your project is. And our top tip is to keep it simple and precise, and follow the prompts in the guidance to use the space to tell us what your project is, when it will happen, who it's aimed at, so who your audience is or who your participants are, and how your project is developing and delivering excellence, which I think we can reasonably translate to like, how's your project going to be great? And then you might find that you often have a clearer understanding of how to summarize your project once you've finished drafting the whole application. So you may want to just go back and rewrite these and then shorten them again. But the character count on Grantium is absolutely unrelenting. So you can't go one character over, it just won't let you submit it. So yeah, it's a real exercise in discipline. So if I can pass back over to Claire now.
I've got the exciting bit of feasibility and risk, budget and finance section, which hooray! For me, actually, I probably always start an application from the budget. Personally, I find it a really helpful way to get in my head what the different elements of the project are, because there's going to be a cost against something or there's going to be income against it. So that's just my approach. Everybody will take it differently. So and also, just before we go on and get into this, we've got the Word version of an application form that we'll give to Cameron to pass on to you, and there's also a Grantium video for you to watch if you are not signed up to Grantium. So that can be, I thoroughly recommend. It's probably the best 5 or 7 minutes you will spend by watching that video if you haven't signed up to Grantium, because it's not an intuitive system, and if you follow the instructions, you'll be fine. But you can't just press a button. It will drive you mad, I have to be honest. So here's some of the terminology that we will use within a form. Expenditure, which is going to be the money you spend to make the project happen. The income, which is money that will come into the project, and this could be actual cash or in-kind support. By in-kind, we mean it's something that isn't actually cash, but nevertheless has a value to it. And that could be services or materials or resources that you would normally pay for that somebody gives to you in kind for your project. That could be rehearsal space or a reduced rate, excuse me, a reduced rate for use of a service that will help you carry out your project. And it can also show a real buy-in and commitment from other people and how they believe and support your work. So it's a little bit like an endorsement, and it can sometimes demonstrate wider interest in your work. We expect to see a budget that balances. That means that the total income is the same as the total expenditure, and we would not expect to see a profit or any losses. We think it's important that artists are paid fairly for their work, so we would expect to see a fee for you and the people you are working with. The amount is likely to depend on a number of factors, including experience and skills, the type of work, and the length of the contract. And there is a various guidance around fair pay to give you an indication of what that sort of expectation is across different industries and sectors. Other terminology, are the items in your budget relevant and reasonable? By that we mean we want to see that a budget actually reflects the activity. So if you were doing a tour to 4 venues in England, but there was the fee for a flight to Madrid without any explanation, we would question as to whether that flight is actually relevant to your project. And also we ask around appropriate financial controls. And these are the tools that ensure that the project budget stays under control. It will vary dependent on the size of the project. If you are requesting a small amount, such as delivering a short series of workshops in a community centre, then an appropriate financial control could be a dedicated Excel spreadsheet to track income and expenditure against an original budget. If you are requesting a higher amount for more complex projects, you will probably need more financial controls, such as keeping the funding in a separate bank account or having 2 signatories on the account or an external independent overview of your funding. A good budget often shows a good snapshot of the overall project. It shows the type of people or organisations who are interested or supportive of the work through the income section. It shows the kind of people and activity that money will be spent on, which indicates what the project is about. And it shows whether the project is inclusive. For example, considering costs to a particular community that the project targets, which could be transport costs for young people attending a workshop or free British Sign Language interpretation of the work that you are delivering. So that's quite a lot of words there, sorry about that, but if we move on to the next slide, please. We also talk about match funding, and that means income from other sources than the Arts Council, as it says there. That could be a local authority or a grant from another trust or foundation, crowdfunding or fees from a venue or ticket sales that you'd expect to make during the project. Now, we do understand that it's getting harder and harder to find match funding for some types of projects than others, and that funding can be harder to come by since the pandemic. So the story you tell is important here. If you aren't able to find match funding, please let us know why not in your application, explaining the reasons and including the efforts to find it. And remember, in-kind support also counts as match funding, so it's another good way of showing the wider support for your project. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Claire. So let's get back to looking at the outcomes I mentioned earlier. So this next part of the application form asks you to write about how your project responds to at least one of them. And by doing so, how your project supports our Let's Create 10-year strategy. There's more in-depth descriptions of the outcomes in the guidance documents, and there's like a paragraph on each, but I just want to give you the more headline information about each of these, and then I'd advise going and reading the longer versions as you're thinking about your application. So the first is creative people. We believe that everybody should have the opportunity to develop and express creativity through their lives, no matter their age, where they live or their background. So this outcome is all around offering opportunities for people to participate and be creative, including reaching more people. Working with early years, children and young people, both in and outside of school settings, also sits underneath this outcome. Okay, so the next outcome is cultural communities. So we want to see villages, towns and cities thrive through a collaborative approach to culture. So this is about improving access to cultural opportunities where people live or on their doorstep. So it's about responding to the needs of the specific communities and working collaboratively with partners to improve educational, health and well-being and economic outcomes through cultural activities. So it's about connecting with people and place together. And so then the final one of our outcomes is creative and cultural country. And this is all about a focus on England's cultural sector and about talent development and accessible career pathways. So it's about new innovative practice and collaborating and using new technology. And it's about like world-class culture coming to audiences in England and about taking work abroad as well. So those are the three outcomes. And as I say, you don't need to respond to all three of them. In fact, I'd strongly advise, if you feel like there's one that your project really responds to, or two, concentrate on those. Some of the weaker applications we see are when people feel like you need to answer everything and you don't. Answer what is responsive to your project. So in your application form, you should set out in writing how your project aligns with one or more of these outcomes to see how your project will help deliver Let's Create. So yeah, I would say we know that many of these projects can support all three, but remember your project only needs to respond to at least one of them. So make sure that that's authentic and appropriate for your project. Okay, so if we go on the next slide, please, Cameron. So these are top tips to respond to the outcome. So how do you decide which outcome or outcomes are most appropriate for your project? So firstly, read the full descriptions of each outcome in the guidance. But our top tip is to also look at our delivery plan, which sets out the practical steps we're taking to deliver Let's Create. So on pages 6 and 7 of the delivery plan, you can find bullet points which highlight some clear elements underneath each of these outcomes. And we think this is the best way to figure out which outcome your project can deliver. So there may be a few things that relate to your project. So take some time to really think about the most important elements of your project and decide on balance which outcomes are the best match. So some examples under each outcome are shown on the slide, and they are, so for creative people, it could be providing a high quality early years activities that reach families from a wider range of backgrounds. For cultural communities, this might be working with communities to better respond to their needs and interests. And creative and cultural country, this might be supporting new types of creative practice or new forms of cultural content, new ways of reaching audiences and partnerships. So, for example, if your project is an app to encourage new ways of engaging with reading, you might select that falls under creative and cultural country. Or if your project involves running dance workshops in local early years settings with high rates of English as an additional language, you might select creative people and cultural communities. So for each outcome you select, you'll fill in a box to describe how your project will contribute to that specific outcome. And you have about 1,500 characters for this. So this is between about 250 and 350 words. So these are just examples. So it's up to you to decide what best fits your project. But again, you don't have a huge amount of space to write all these things as well. So just think carefully about how you want to communicate what it is that you're doing. Okay, I'm going to pass back to Claire now.
Thanks, Anna. For me, the outcomes is the what, and the investment principles is the how. And on this part of the application form, you only need to respond to inclusivity and relevance. If that is the area that is most appropriate for you, you have to fill in that part. The other investment principles are there, and you can respond to them if they are appropriate for you. With the inclusivity and relevance, as I say, that is one that everybody must reply to, and it's your chance to tell us about who you want to reach with the project and how you have identified them. We want you to think about the steps you will take to make sure the project is open and accessible. And this will depend on your project and what you want to do. But in every instance, we want to know that you've really thought about how, and you can remove the barriers to extend who you will reach. So in terms of reference, we want to know how your project will involve and reflect the people and or communities you'd like to work with. And all of this connects to our equality objectives as a public funding body, and wanting to see more equitable distribution. I'll include a link to that when send information over to Cameron around our equality objectives, so you can see what those are. Because we want our investment to improve opportunities for everyone, especially those with underrepresented protected characteristics and from disadvantaged socio-economic groups. And this includes your audiences and also talent development and career opportunities that you may offer. And you can find more prompts for each investment principle in the application guidance documents. And for each IP you select, investment principles, IP, use the boxes to make your case for how your project will contribute to that specific outcome. And each box has 1,500 characters, which is about 250 to 350 words. Next slide, please, Cameron. So again, we've tried to put together some top tips. As Anna has already said, we really want to see you to be able to provide authentic and relevant responses to IPs and outcomes. And really, less is more. It's tempting to think that if you respond to more, then you're more likely to get funded. This isn't true. You won't be penalised if you only respond to inclusivity and relevance. And when looking at ambition and quality, this offers an opportunity to tell us why you're the right person to do the project and what makes it great. And you can talk about who is doing it, how they have done it before, or what potential they have in terms of trying something new. So it's worth considering this investment principle if you're working on something new or innovative, or progressing skills, or growing your career or organisation. And one thing we really would like to stress is that your responses are specific, and you can give detail that are personal to your project. A common mistake is that answers lack specific details about who you will engage with your project or work on it. So do avoid saying things like, we want our project to be accessible to everyone, or we will put our content online so everyone can access it. We really would like to say that if you give us a sense of what you're actively doing to achieve the IP, what we want to see is your response to the IP. We don't want to see a manifesto type statement. It's a very limited word count, so use it to be able to tell us what you're actually doing, and the practical small steps you're taking to put this in place to be able to deliver your project. And we'll look at a couple of examples that we think are a good place to start. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Cameron. So here's some examples. It's about being specific, not general. So here you can see it's writing about the communities that a project will engage with. They are specific rather than general, and they make 5 detailed points which are personal to their project. If you read these through, you can see the difference between these points and the generic statement, we want our project to be accessible to everyone. So I'll just pause there for a moment for you to have a read through at that slide before I pass over to Anna.
Once again, if you've got any questions along the way, do pop them in the chat and we'll get to them.
Plunge into silence.
Oh, yes. Yes, at the moment we know, but yeah, just think of any questions, get asking away.
We're nearly towards the end, aren't we, Anna? We've not got much more to go through now, I don't think.
Yeah, and I realised that this is quite a load of information as well. So yeah, thank you for bearing with us. Cameron, if everybody has read that, if we can go on to the next slide.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so that's all all the stuff that you need to put into your application. And this is the practical how you do it. So I'm just going to run through the last few slides, which are the practical side of things, and then we'll open it up to Q&As as well. So we've spoken about the application form, but this is how you go about practically applying. So to make an application, you'll need to submit it on our online system that's called Grantium, and you can find that through our website. I think it might be one of the tabs along the top, but if you Google it as well, Arts Council Grantium, it'll come up. I won't spend long talking about this, but it's important to know that you need to create the user account and the application profile if you haven't already. And actually, it's saying here it might take up to 10 days to set up. So if you're thinking about applying, I'd just say crack on and set up a profile now. If you want to apply as an organisation, though, you'll need a bank account in the organisation's name, and you'll need to have a Grantium profile set up under that name. So whether your profile is as an individual or an organisation, you'll have to wait a few days until we validate the account. So again, just don't leave it till the last minute. I recommend creating a profile as soon as you're considering an application. I've said that about 47 times now, so this is really important. All that's left then is a quick eligibility questionnaire, and then you start your application. And the eligibility questionnaire is extremely straightforward. The application form questions are available in a Word document on our website, but I think also Claire said that she would send that on to Cameron. So we recommend drafting your answers on Word before you start inputting onto the system in case you have any technical problems, or in case Grantium doesn't think you're working in it and logs you out. It's not perfect, Grantium. It's not the perfect kind of user-friendly system, but it's how we're able to accept huge volumes of applications and make decisions and pay out successful grants. So if you ever do run into any trouble while you're using it, you can use the live chat function on our website, or get in touch with the customer services team, who are all Grantium experts and can give you some support. Okay, so next slide, please, Cameron. Okay, so this is about how we make decisions. So what happens after you have submitted your application? So this graphic shows the journey of your application for under 30,000, if you're applying for under £30,000. So firstly, it will be reviewed by our investment centre, who run an eligibility and risk check. And this will pick up things like if your project isn't supporting one of our art forms, or if your budget doesn't balance. And if they discover anything that they think makes it ineligible or a major risk, they will send it back to you at that stage. And this usually takes under 1 week, and they will provide a full explanation of the reasons why, which will hopefully mean that you're able to change whatever that might be and then resubmit it. If they don't find any issues at that stage, your application will progress to a decision meeting. And in the Southeast, we usually have between 1 to 2 decision meetings per week, each with up to about 30 applications in them. And your application will be considered against all the others in that meeting across all the different art forms. So it's really important to know that if you're theatre, it's not just theatre relationship managers that will be in that meeting. Similarly, if you're visual arts, it might not be visual arts. It might be, but it might not, which is also why, going back to a point some time ago about being really clear about what you want to do, it's really important that you're very clear about your project and how you want to achieve it, because we want it to be translatable to anybody who's reading your application. We're all very experienced in reading grant applications, but nonetheless, just clarity around what you want to do is really important. So all the applications will be read fully and decisions will be made in a meeting between two relationship managers, like myself or Claire, and we discuss the strengths and weaknesses of each application. So demand is very high for project grants and budgets are tight, and sometimes we can't fund good projects. If your application is unsuccessful, you'll receive feedback on how to improve it, and we strongly encourage you to act on this. If your feedback is a comment that says we decided to fund a mix of different applications that we viewed as making the strongest contribution to achieving our strategy, this means that there aren't any further notes and it was up against really strong competition and we have no specific feedback that we can give to resubmit it as it is. And it can be, that you can resubmit your application as it was. So the fund is open at all times and you can reapply as many times as you like. You won't be penalised for reapplying as it's a learning process. So yes, if you get a rejection, as I say, read the rejection reason, respond to it, and you can then put your application back in. Okay, could we get the next slide, please? I was just thinking actually on the submitting an application as well. An important point is that you can, so if you have put in your application for an under £30,000 grant, it takes anything up to 8 weeks to have a decision made on it. You might, as an organisation or an artist, have another fabulous idea that you also want to put an application in for. You can't put an application in while you're waiting on a decision on one that's already in the system. So if it's within that 8-week period, you haven't been told whether it's successful or unsuccessful, you can't put an application in. You can, however, once you've had your decision, say if you put your project in, it's been successful, your project's underway, you can put in another application before your project has finished. Obviously, you want to be thinking about your capacity, but it might be that it's for a project that's going to run after this one, or however you want to run it. But it can't be before you have a decision made, but you can put your application in while you're delivering what you've been supported for. So finally, this slide is just about how we have different ways that you can get further advice if you are considering applying. So the first port of call should always be our website, and there is step-by-step guidance on how to apply there. There are different guidance documents that you may want for specific requirements, depending on the type of project you're applying for. There's also a short quiz to get you thinking about whether your project's at the right stage to consider putting an application form in. And our customer services team can advise you on the eligibility of your activity and discuss any parts of the application that you're unsure of, and to help you to use the online form. You can get in touch by email and phone or through the live chat function on our website. And I can just verify that the customer services team are absolutely brilliant. They're total whizzes at everything. And final slide.
Oh, yeah.
And this is our last one. So that's it. So that's a basic introduction to project grants. Thank you for listening. I know it was really information heavy, but we've now got some time for questions. So do please type them in the Q&A. And as we mentioned at the start, we will send all of this information as well to Cameron, which can be sent on as well. So yes, over to everybody else.
Lovely. Thank you, Claire and Anna, for running through that presentation. Claire's been active in the chat as well, answering a couple of your questions that have come up, but do type away, or if you prefer to speak them now, let us know. So no worries, Chris, thanks for joining us. Lovely having you there. Indeed. Great. Yes, you can catch up on that later. All good.
Cameron, we had a question from Alex, who I don't know if he'd be happy to just talk a little bit more. He was asking about applying as an individual and as an organisation, it might be helpful to just get the context to be able to.
If you're able to elaborate, Alex, if you've got a mic on the go.
Is everybody okay? I mean, as Anna says, you've been amazing in with this.
Oh, we've got some.
We've got Alex.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, can hear you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to find out, so if you was an artist and you was applying for yourself, so that would be as an individual, but then are you able at the same time as an organisation to apply to run workshops for others in the community as a CIC company?
Do you mean them happening at the same time?
Yes.
Cameron, should we turn the presentation off?
Sorry, yes, of course. Sorry, I forgot about that. There we are.
So, Alex, I'd say yes, you can. But as I was mentioning before, you wouldn't be able to have 2 live applications in at the same time. However, if you were an artist, you had applied as an individual artist, and then also you were in somebody else's application as a named artist with their organisation, that would be fine. Those 2 applications could be live at the same time. That's right, isn't it, Claire?
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, Alex, to consider is that you can have more than one Grantium sort of profile. And so there, we have come across examples where there is somebody who's the artistic director of a theatre company, and there are applications that come through with her as the artistic director of that theatre company. But also more recently, she has made an application in her own right as an individual artist. So does that example help clarify things? I mean, we obviously, it's public funding money, so we do want to make sure that public funding is being spent appropriately, rather than looking to have to sort of try and find a loophole around the system. But you would be eligible if you applied as a company for a project to put on a play, which, with the example I'm suggesting, and then as an individual artist to do some R&D on a piece of work which is just with you. So that is eligible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That is what I was looking for. Because it would be an individual company, which is a CIC organisation, to run workshops, and then separately as an individual artist for like a gig, for instance, for one person.
Yeah, but just to be clear, you'd have to have that as different profiles on
Grantium.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Perfect. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you for elaborating, Alex. That's great. I'm just seeing if there's anything. Well, to be fair, Claire's been fielding them in the chat quite well. So, I think, maybe if I just pop it out.
Is there anything in the chat that would be worth kind of discussing?
Yeah, anything that you'd like to, any advice that you'd like to voice, Claire, that you've given?
Yeah, I'll just run through. Sorry, the ones so that everybody, just in case, that we had a question around fair pay, and how much you should pay yourself, and I've included in the chat there the link to our fair pay page.
Oh, I see. Sophie writes just raised her hand as well. If you had a question you'd like to voice, or was that an accident? Either's fine.
Sorry, my phone's on there. Oh yeah. Just on, is it possible to elaborate on matching? If
Match funding.
Yes.
Yeah. So what would you like to know about it?
Sorry, I'll get rid of that application wanting to do it's won't be able to get it unless I get funding from Art Council England. So it's that you have to have both, otherwise maybe.
Is it somewhere that have you secured funding elsewhere, but you also, to be able to access that funding, you need to get Arts Council funding?
I think so. I haven't really explored it properly. It's very vague. I went to a kind of one of these with Eastbourne Council, and it wasn't very clear. So I was just.
Well, it might be. I mean, sorry. No, it's fine. I was just trying to think my way into kind of explaining it without making it totally confusing. So if I put it from the perspective of the Arts Council, we wouldn't look to plug a gap for another funder in that way. We would be looking for an artist or an organisation to be able to propose a project that aligns with our aims as a funder. Now, alongside that, it might be that you're also applying for somebody else for the same project, which is absolutely fine. Some funders like to be the sole funders of projects. That's not the case with the Arts Council. So with match funding, it might be that Eastbourne Council or East Sussex. Where did you say? East Sussex?
Yeah, East Sussex. It's Eastbourne. They're going to be holding the the Turner Prize next year, and they're wanting to do sort of a Fringe festival thing, and it's 20 artists, and you won't get funding unless your project is chosen by them and by you guys. So it's quite it was.
I'm not too sure about the specifics of something like that, because some situations are they can't. So you might tour a show, for example, and a theatre will take your project. You have to have been successful in your funding to be able to deliver that project. But I'm not too sure about the specifics around that, and I wouldn't want to kind of speak for
no, of course not.
For the organisation, but outside of this, we'd be happy to kind of have a look at that, maybe, and kind of clarify that. But as a kind of rule, match funding is funding that you have accessed elsewhere to be able to complete your budget. So if your project costs £20,000 to do, and you have £5,000 from a theatre who are going to pay you to put your show on, and another £2,000 that you've crowdfunded, and so then what the shortfall is £13,000. Like, well, just making these figures up and trying to £13,000. That would be what you're applying for the Arts Council for, and your match funding would be from elsewhere. The supporting kind that Claire had mentioned before would be anything that might have a monetary cost, but it's being delivered for free. So that might be, say, if you're putting on an exhibition and the gallery are giving you the space for free to put your exhibition on. So if you were having to pay for it, it might cost £500 a day for that space, and they're giving you that space for 5 days for free. So that's £2,500 that you can put there as match funding, as support in kind. Or if somebody's helping you with the marketing, and it might normally cost £100 to be in their e-newsletter, or for example, but they're not charging you, that can go in as support in kind. So that also brings down the ask of from the Arts Council. But yeah, your specific example, I'd say maybe that's one we could have a look at offline and unpick with you a little bit.
Yeah,
thanks. I appreciate that.
I would just add in just more sort of outside of just finances, the benefit of match funding is it's giving evidence of need. So if somebody is paying you for putting on an event or putting on a show, then that shows that they've got buy-in And it's not just like you're wanting to do it. It shows that there are other people that believe in what you are doing, and they are going to be able to ensure that you can lever other income against Arts Council's investment. And that's very positive. That's showing collaboration, that's showing partnership. And it might also, as Anna was saying, if somebody is supporting you with marketing skills, it's bringing additional support, resources, expertise that is enabling you to do that project well. So that much is sort of thinking about how people are helping you to enable it. And when somebody does something, there is a value against that. So that's how you can tell us about that in the budget context.
Oh, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
No worries at all. If anyone's got some other questions, do put them in the chat. We've got a couple more. Helen has asked, may I ask a question about NPOs? I don't know if you'd like to elaborate on that at all, Helen, if you'd like a moment now.
Is that okay, or is this the wrong format for that?
You can ask away.
To answer, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering, I know, or I understand, correct me obviously if I'm wrong, that NPOs are granted every 3 years. Is that correct?
At the moment, that's the funding agreement. Yes, 23 to 26 is the most recent round.
Lovely. Okay, love. So I understand as well that you've already granted the ones starting in 2023. So if my theatre company wanted to apply for that next time, do we have to wait until 2026, or can we apply in that 3-year block, if you see what I mean, before that period ends, if that makes sense?
That's a really good question. And in short, no, you can't. It's kind of core funding over that funded period of time. I would say as well that NPO isn't for everyone. It's often the organisations who come in for NPO funding have been kind of regular recipients of Arts Council funding up until that point. There is a kind of infrastructure that sits underneath it in terms of reporting mechanisms and reporting against Let's Create strategy. And it might be for a lot of organisations, project funding is better placed because it can be more kind of like flight of fancy in terms of what you want to do as an organisation. I mean, by all means, sorry, somebody's asking what's NPO. That's a really good question. Yeah. We just kind of got into kind of total kind of acronym territory, which I think is a real Arts Council thing as well. So apologies. It's National Portfolio Organisations. They used to be called regularly funded organisations some time ago. But yeah, as Helen rightly pointed out, we have just gone through all the assessments for the next investment period, and announcements were made quite recently about who is in this portfolio for the next 3 years. But I would say, Helen, if you haven't received Arts Council funding beforehand, I would suggest looking at project funding and how that can support your organisation.
Great, that's lovely. Thank you. We have actually received it. I was the one that went back and said we got
congratulations. Brilliant.
But that's brilliant. That's really good information. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I mean, in project funding, it goes up to significant sums. I mean, we've talked predominantly today about under 30 applications, but there's over 30, there's over 100,000. You know, there is, for national and strategic activity, there is project funding available. But obviously it is a case of building up a track record and building up a experience in that way. So project funding can support significant activity, can't it, Anna?
Lovely. Any more questions? People do. You can raise a hand, you can put it in the chat, you can just talk, I'm sure. But if anyone's got any others.
We've got one from Gabriella asking about shows that focus heavily on mental health and asking, is it a good idea to reach out to charities before the Arts Council application, or can it be done before, during and after? I can start with some thoughts, Anna, if you're happy to add in. I mean, if with a project that is working with mental health, I think we would really want to see expertise there if that's not something that you have as your key focus. Going back to the match funding conversation with Sophie, having partners that are part of a project, we would expect to see to ensure that there is quality and support and expertise that is appropriate to support you as an artist or organisation, but equally participants and audiences that would be part of that project. Anything else from you, Anna?
Just to echo that really, and to say that if you had proposed a project that strongly focused on mental health and it didn't feel like there was the partnerships to be able to offer that support for yourself or your participants, it would be, I would say that it would feel like it was an underdeveloped project, and that might be part of the feedback. So if it was a charity, for example, as you suggested, that you wanted to work with in partnership with, I would suggest putting all of those partnerships in place before looking to submit it. Because one of the things that's quite useful with going through the process of submitting an application, it's almost like you're doing a lot of the planning beforehand, so that if your application is successful, it's kind of like fantastic, pick up the phone, drop an email to all your partners, whoever it is that you've said you want to work with, and you're ready to get it up and going. So yeah, all of that pre-prep beforehand definitely strengthens an application.
There we go. The funding side of things is the question Gabriella was asking about. Well, it would, if it's part of an application, prior we were saying that we wouldn't expect to see a project to lose money or to make a profit. So in short, we would expect you to have those contacts and that outline in place in your budget when you made the application to Arts Council. And we recognise that it might be expected rather than confirmed, and that those conversations with a particular charity that supports mental health outcomes is happening at the same time as the conversation with Arts Council. But as part of your application budget, we would expect to see listed other sources of income from charities that you would expect to be working with as part of the project. Hopefully that covers it. Does that sound right? Wow.
Gotta thank you. Lovely stuff. Great. I'm just having a scan to see if we missed anything, but Claire's posted some useful links, which again I'll save the chat as well, but we'll have everything sent out after. I've got another hand from Sophie. Sophie, you got another question there?
This one is for you, Cameron. As I'm based in Eastbourne, would my kind of application for kind of, if I did something in the future with Brighton Fringe, would that be okay? Or because I know a lot of places they want kind of very local. Is it? I don't know. Is it?
No, we take anyone. We don't have, except from Eastbourne, because as someone that lives in Eastbourne, we blacklisted that.
Okay.
But no, we there's no limits on anything. I would only the only thing I'd say is if you're looking at some of the bursaries that we run and partner with organizations, some things like that, some of them have criteria about being based in specific places or on certain things. But to register a Fringe show, no, we take anywhere from across the country and internationally as well. We don't have any limits on that. Big up the Eastbourne Massive. Lovely. Right. Have we got any other questions? I don't think so. Again, the final moments for any questions. I think we're coming towards the end if we don't have any others. But again, yeah, we'll be sending out information, and we'll also have details on how you can follow up with Anna and Claire if you do have anything that you think of later and you're like, I should have asked that. We will be able to able to put you in touch. Great. I'm just getting thank yous now, so I feel like we may be getting towards the end and wrapping up of this session. So if you speak now or forever hold your peace, but until then, I will say thank you everyone for sticking out this evening. It is an information dump, but hopefully you'll be able to find some useful information and part of that, and have a successful project grant application as well. That'd be great. And thank you once again for Anna and Claire for coming down and joining this session. It's been lovely to have you both back and your knowledge as well.
Thank you for having us.